Hello, and welcome to another of the Good Project's professional development sessions. Today's topic is exploring values. We're going to look at what values mean and what they are. We'll do a reflective exercise together that will get us to think about our own personal values, and then we'll look at how we can bring values and values discussions into the learning environments and classrooms that we're a part of. Just as a reminder to begin of what we previously covered in our professional development series so far, we looked at the Good Project's framework of good work. We initially started looking at the framework in totality, and then we broke down these three components of the framework: excellence, ethics, and engagement, and looked really deeply at each of them. Today, when we think about values, you might want to consider how values can support you in decision-making to do good work in alignment with each of these three components. But first, what are values? Values are standards, principles, virtues, or ideals that we hold to be important. They might guide our judgment and decision-making across areas of your life. That could be personal, professional, or social. And just as a reminder that this is not really about possessions or specific people, but really about concepts or abstract ideals that you find to be important or significant to the way that you live your life. For example, we wouldn't talk about necessarily something like a phone as a value or a specific family member as a value. However, if you value something like a telephone, perhaps it's the connection that it gives you to others. Perhaps it's something about innovation that you're connecting with. For family members, maybe it's the idea of loving relationships that you're connecting with. Some examples of values are these abstract concepts shown in the picture: honesty, respect, integrity, responsibility, equality, innovation. As I said, these are all abstract ideas or ideals that can represent values of what's important to us. A few top-level reminders about values, or things that we've noticed about values, is that they're usually relatively stable over time, but they might still change. So when we say this, it would be odd if, for example, you valued honesty one day, and then the next day you woke up and you said, I actually don't really value honesty anymore. I value empathy much more. It's usually the case that your values are relatively stable, but maybe over time, over the years, over the course of your lifespan, based on experiences you've had, you see that your values have shifted a little bit. I think that that is normal. They may come from a variety of influences and experiences as well. So your values might be shaped by, for example, your family upbringing. What you experienced in that environment might have handed down values to you. They could also come from particular cultural groups that you're a part of. They might come from a religious tradition that you practice or that you grew up with as well. Or they may come from personal experiences that you've had across the lifespan that have showed you perhaps you really value truth, for instance, based on some experiences you had in a schooling environment or based on interactions with a particular teacher. And they can also act as crucial foundations for people in doing good work. So as I spoke about, values might guide you as you make decisions day to day, and this might help you do good work that is excellent, ethical, and engaging, connecting back to the framework. Perhaps if you value honesty, that might be how you think about ethical conduct on the job or in other environments in which you make decisions. Maybe if you value efficiency, that really helps you find engagement and personal meaning in what you do day to day. So your values can underpin a lot of how you experience the three dimensions of good work, and they can also guide you as you try to navigate working environments or environments as a learner or a student or a member of a group. So now we're going to do an exercise together that will help us think a little more deeply about what values are important to us. So take a look at the list of values displayed on the screen. And what you're going to do is choose the 4 that you think are most important to your life. So scan over this list and choose just 4 that you think are most important. This can be a bit of a challenge. There are about 50 items on this list, but try to pare down to just the top 4. And just as a note that if you are having something in mind as a value for you that is not represented on this list, please feel free to list it. You might want to get a sheet of paper out for this exercise or write on perhaps a Word doc online. Feel free to pause the video here as you think. You might want to give yourself a minute or two for this. And when you're ready, now narrow down to just your top 2 values. So look at the top 4 values that you chose, and now just pick the top 2 that you really think are most important. Again, this might be a challenge, but try to think about which of the 2 are really going to be, or sorry, which of the 4 that you're narrowing down to your top 2 are really going to be the most important to you. And then moving on, just put those aside for now. You can keep them in mind, but write down instead all of the ways in which you spend your time in a typical week. So those might be things like leisure time with family or otherwise, work, maybe particular hobbies, sleep could be on the list. Some people forget that. So just take some time to list out in list format all of the ways that you spend your time in a typical week. Again, you may wish to pause here in order to do that and give yourself a few minutes to write down the activities. Once you have your list of activities, try to assign each item on the list a percentage based on how much time out of 100 you allocate to that activity per week. And then what you're going to do with those percentages is create a pie chart showing how you spend your time in a typical week. So this might require you to combine certain items on the list into particular broad categories. Maybe you'll have one category that's work-related items. Maybe you'll have one category that's leisure-related items, maybe travel. Try to combine down in order to be able to draw a pie chart with several segments about how you spend your time in a week. Once you're ready, as you might have guessed, we'll ask you to compare your pie chart and your values. So take a look at your pie chart, how you spend your time, and then those 2 values that you chose as most important to you. And you might want to ask yourself these 2 questions. Where do you see your values connecting to how you spend your time? And second, where might you see a disconnect between your values and how you spend your time? So this exercise can be a helpful reminder to consider how the abstract ideas, concepts that are most important to us and our values are showing up in how we actually live day to day. There could be a connection, and if you see a connection, feel free to draw an arrow to the segment of the chart and write the name of the value that you really see connecting with that segment of the pie chart. If you don't see a connection, there may be a variety of reasons for this, and that could be maybe there's an overwhelming set of tasks or ways to spend time in the particular week. Maybe you have really demanding set of work responsibilities or family responsibilities. Those are all valid and maybe reasons why you see a disconnect between values and time. I think that this exercise is worth keeping in mind, not as something to be stressful or feel guilty about, but a reminder to yourself in order to try to bring values into the ways that you spend your time in a particular week, and also to try to find maybe further connection points. If you're trying to bring a value into your life more, where are the leverage points in how you spend your time where you would really have the freedom and the ability to maybe do that a little bit more? And this exercise can be helpful to do with students as well, or learners of all ages. Now, in front of each value you chose, try to write a verb that represents how you want that value to guide you and how you spend your time now that you have that pie chart and you've considered the connection to your values a little more. So that could be something that you want to continue doing with that value, or it could be something that maybe you want to start doing with that value. For example, share creativity if creativity was important to you. It could be if introspection was one of your values, maybe practicing introspection a little bit more, finding the time or little moments to practice introspection. If you had chosen gratitude, maybe it's to enunciate gratitude and thank the people who you feel grateful for a little bit more often. So take some time to do that and consider how you might carry those action verbs forward into maybe your next week and beyond now that you've reflected on this. And you may wish to revisit this activity from time to time in the future. Now it's time to either share if you're in a group or consider if you're on your own. Did this exercise help you realize anything about your values, the way you spend your time, or both? And how can you use this exercise or similar activities with your students or learners? So pause the video here and you can either have a discussion, again, if you're in a group about these prompts, or you can maybe do some journaling if you're independently on your own, and just take some time to write down some reflections. And when you're ready, you can come back and we'll move on. So as a window into the values that people have chosen most often from our own research or casual data collection, this is the result of our value sort exercise that's available on the Good Projects website. Over the several years that it's been posted, we've had over 100,000 people respond to the value sort exercise. And we thought it would be interesting just to talk about what are the top most chosen values that people have selected. And you can see here the highest 5 bars are personal growth and learning, honesty and integrity, rewarding and supportive relationships, creating balance in one's life, and understanding, helping, and serving others. You might want to think about how your own values aligned or didn't align with that. Again, there's no right or wrong answers. Just interesting to note the pattern that we see based on the responses that we have. And you can also see some of the shorter bars as well. Fame and success, professional conduct, recognition from one's field, and solitude and contemplation. Maybe you would find some of those to be valuable or not valuable to you. Maybe consider how your own pattern of values might align or not align with this set of responses. Now we want to talk about some ways to potentially bring values into the classroom or the learning environment in which you are. So the first thing we want to emphasize is the idea of making values visible. So it can be important to try to surface values. They're often under the surface or maybe not named. And we think that making values visible can be really vital and important to helping guide what is important in a community or what is important to particular people in that community when values are able to be seen and talked about. One way that we can do this is through the activity that we have available at the bit.ly link. So this is basically a paper group version of our value sort tool. So you would have students choose their top 4 and bottom 4 values, and then go around the room and tally or star based on whether those values were in their top or their bottom values. And you can then add them up and see what's really important for the class, what's maybe not so important for the class, and how do the values cluster, or maybe they don't. And then each student could consider, how do my own values match or not match with what might be important or least important in the class? That can be a way to spark reflection, conversation, and also maybe a conversation around making space for diverse values, depending on what you see. Other ideas could be creating posters of the values that you want to prioritize in your classroom in a central location that students can see. So a lot of schools and classes individually have values, maybe based on norm setting, that are really important to the way that the community or group wants to function. Making sure that those are accessible and visible can be really important as a reminder during moments of challenge. And then also creating opportunities for value storytelling. So regularly having a student, for example, sharing a time when one of their top values was put into practice can be really helpful in making the values come alive and applicable to real-world situations. The second idea we wanted to raise is the idea of values and community. So we've been doing a lot of talking about values individually. At the personal level, our exercise led us through what values were important to us as individuals. But of course, we are all a part of different communities and groups, and our values might mesh or not mesh with the communities that we're a part of. And it's important to consider how our values might be shaped or shift between these different environments. So for example, you could think about what your values are between your family life, between your community life, and your work life. And they might not be exactly the same. You could also think about this through the rings of responsibility framework that we've developed on the Good Project. So today we spent a lot of time talking about values at the self level in the center, But what about those close to us? What do we think they value? What about the communities that we're a part of? Maybe our school or a particular hobby group. What values are really important in those environments? We might do a complete set of reflection exercises about how values are different or the same across these environments. And I think that opening up that conversation can be enriching and help people realize maybe values shift between these environments. For example, perhaps in a workplace, I might value relationships and openness more than I would value that in my personal life, where I might value solitude or contemplation a little bit more. Other ideas could be making clear, as I've just kind of indicated, that values might depend on context, activity, or life area, and that is okay and to be expected. Bringing parents or families into the conversation, especially if you're working with adolescents or younger students around values, this could be opening up a conversation around parents' values or how family values might intersect with the school's mission or values. And then finally, looking for opportunities to connect with others who might share the class or school values. So that could include in activities like service learning. Maybe there's a community partner, a business or an organization that maybe has the same values as your class or as your students that you could connect with and that you could really see developing a learning opportunity with that would help the concepts come alive for students. So you might want to consider now that we've talked about some ideas for learning environments, what else have you done or do you want to do around values exploration? And how are you making values a part of your practice today? So if you want to pause the video and either do some individual reflection or group discussion about this, this is a good opportunity to do so. Another idea we wanted to leave you with is the question of what you would add to or eliminate from the list of values that we displayed here today for our reflection exercise. So this set of values is one that the Good Project pared down based on different values, itineraries, and lists that were available online. We thought that this would be a fairly representative set of values, but we recognize that there may be things that we are missing, and there may be things that people consider on this list that are redundant or not necessary. If you are interested in providing us with some feedback, this is an example for some real-life applied research, we would love for you to take our survey. So this survey at the bit.ly link asks you to go through an exercise where you choose your top values, to define them and talk about why you chose them, then to choose your bottom values after that, and to talk about why you've chosen them and to define them, and finally to talk about what you might add, potentially being missing from the list, and what you might eliminate from the list. This is not a requirement, but if you're interested, please feel free to take the survey and provide some feedback. As a closer, it might be helpful to think about one value that you are appreciating based on the conversation and the reflection that you did today, or potentially one value that you want to further explore. Maybe something that was on the list that you haven't considered as much yet and that struck you that you would like to further explore or think about in the future. So thank you for joining us for this exploration of values today. I hope you've enjoyed it, maybe got to have a deeper sense of what your own personal values are, and also taken away some ideas of what you might want to do or start doing with your own learners. Thanks again.